Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all feeling comfortable right now, maybe settling in with a blanket, maybe dimming the lights a little. Tonight, we're going to take a very long, very relaxed journey through one of the most quietly mysterious animated shows to ever air on television. We're talking about The Amazing World of Gumball. And before you think this is just a silly kids cartoon with nothing deeper going on underneath the surface, I promise you, there is so much more to this show than meets the eye. The writers built layer after layer of mystery into this series, some of which were never fully explained, some of which were left deliberately open for fans to theorize about, and some of which connect to each other in ways that took years for people to figure out. So tonight, we're going to explore all of it. We're going to walk through the biggest unsolved mysteries, the fan theories that actually hold up, the connections nobody noticed at first, and the questions the show itself never bothered to answer. And we're going to do it slowly, calmly, and thoroughly. There's no rush. This is a 2-hour journey, and I want you to enjoy every single minute of it. Before we begin, I'd just like to gently ask that if you're enjoying this kind of deep dive, please consider subscribing to the channel. It's completely free, and it genuinely helps us keep making content like this for you. Okay, let's get settled in, let's take a breath, and let's start exploring the mysteries of Elmore. The Void. The dimension that erases you from existence. Let's start with what is arguably the single most fascinating and unsettling piece of mythology that The Amazing World of Gumball ever introduced. It's called the Void. And once you understand what the Void is and what it does, a huge number of the show's other mysteries start to click into place. The Void first appears in a Season 3 episode simply called The Void. In this episode, Gumball, Darwin, and their friend Mr. Small begin noticing that things are disappearing from Elmore. A classmate named Molly vanishes without a trace. Her locker disappears. Everyone forgets she ever existed. Even photographs of her are being quietly erased. It's like she was never there at all. As the three of them investigate, they discover that reality itself has gaps in it. Literal seams where the world has folded in on itself, places where something used to exist, and now simply doesn't. When they pry one of these seams open, they get sucked into an entirely different dimension, and what they find there is extraordinary. The Void is described as a place where all of the universe's mistakes reside. Every error, every inconsistency, every failed idea that was ever made and then discarded. Jorts are there. Laserdiscs are there. The mullet is there. It's essentially a cosmic garbage dump where anything the universe decided was a mistake ends up. But here's what makes the Void genuinely unsettling. It doesn't just collect mistakes passively, it actively hunts for them. It reaches into reality and pulls things out. Characters, objects, entire concepts. If something is deemed a mistake, if it doesn't serve a purpose or fit properly into the world, the Void will quietly remove it, and when it does, everyone forgets it was ever there. No grief, no memorial, just a gap where something used to be, and nobody even notices the gap. The show establishes that the Void seems to have some kind of intelligence or intention behind it. It's not just a random force of nature, it makes decisions. It chose to erase Molly because she was, in some sense, unnecessary to the story of Elmore. It chose to erase a locker, a treehouse, an entire person. And it did so with a kind of quiet, patient precision that makes it feel almost deliberate. Now, what's particularly interesting is what happens after Gumball and his friends escape the Void. Their memories of the entire experience are immediately wiped. The Void makes sure they forget everything they just witnessed. They don't remember finding Molly. They don't remember seeing the dimension of mistakes. It's as if the entire adventure never happened. The Void protects its own secrecy. This raises a fascinating question that the show never fully answers. If the Void can erase memories so easily, how much of what we've seen throughout the series is actually accurate? How many events have been quietly rewritten by the Void without anyone noticing? How many characters have disappeared and been forgotten before Molly? The show hints that this has been happening for a very long time, Banana Barbara, the prophetic painter we'll talk about later, has artwork depicting the void long before any of the main characters discover it. She seems to know about it instinctively, as if the void's presence is something that can be sensed even if it can't be seen. And then there's the biggest question of all regarding the void. What is it actually for? The show offers one possible explanation in its later episodes. In the rewrite, it's established that the void will ultimately destroy the entire universe of Elmore should the show ever get cancelled, or if the main characters ever discover that their reality is fictional. The void, in this interpretation, is essentially a metaphor for cancellation. It's the mechanism by which a fictional world stops existing. When a show is pulled from the air, the void swoops in and erases everything. This is an incredibly meta piece of storytelling. The writers are essentially saying that the void isn't just a plot device within the show. It's a commentary on the nature of fictional worlds themselves. Every cartoon, every show, every story that has ever been told has its own version of the void waiting in the wings. The moment the audience stops watching, the moment the network stops funding it, the world simply ceases to exist. Nobody mourns it. Nobody remembers it. It just disappears into the void of forgotten media. It's a surprisingly somber idea for a children's cartoon, and it's one of the reasons the void remains one of the most talked about pieces of lore in the entire Gumball fandom. But let's sit with the void a little longer, because there are layers to it that most people don't fully appreciate until they go back and re-watch the series with fresh eyes. One of the most interesting things about the void is the way it seems to operate on a kind of judgment. It doesn't erase things randomly, it makes choices, and those choices seem to be based on whether something has a purpose in the world or not. Think about who gets erased and who doesn't. Molly Collins, who vanished before the episode even began, was apparently someone who had become so isolated and forgotten by her classmates that the void decided she no longer belonged. Rob, who spent seasons 1 and 2 as a completely unremarkable background character with no lines, no personality, and no interactions that mattered, was pulled in for the same reason. He simply wasn't necessary. But the main characters, the ones who drive the story forward, the ones who matter to the narrative, they're protected. The void can't touch them because they serve a purpose. They have a role to play. And this raises a deeply uncomfortable question about the nature of existence in Elmore. Does your life only have value if you're important to someone else's story? Does the universe literally erase you if you become irrelevant? It's a bleak interpretation, but it's one the show seems to support. And it gives every single minor character in Elmore a kind of quiet, existential vulnerability. At any moment, if they stop being interesting, if they stop being useful, the void could come for them too. It's always there, always watching, always waiting for someone to become a mistake. There's also the question of whether the void has ever made a wrong call. Has it ever erased something that actually mattered? Has it ever pulled someone out of reality who shouldn't have been removed? We'll never know, because by definition, once something is erased by the void, there's no record of it ever existing. The void is, in a sense, the ultimate censor. It decides what stays in the story and what gets cut, and nobody can argue with it, because nobody remembers what was cut. Rob, the boy who became a villain. Because nobody remembered him. If the void is the most fascinating piece of mythology in the show, then Rob is arguably the most tragic character. And his story is intimately tied to the void, because Rob is one of the very few people to ever escape it. Rob first appears in the show as a completely unremarkable background character. He's a tall blue cyclops who attends Elmore Junior High. He shows up in the background of classroom scenes. He walks past in the hallways. He's never given a name in any of his early appearances. Gumball and Darwin don't know who he is. Other students don't seem to notice him either. He is, by every definition, a nobody. And because he is a nobody, the void decides he's a mistake. At some point during Season 3, Rob is quietly pulled into the void. He's erased from reality. Nobody notices he's gone. Nobody remembers him. And here's the part that makes his story genuinely heartbreaking. When Gumball, Darwin, and Mr. Small enter the void to rescue Molly, Rob is there. He sees them. He tries to get their attention. He calls out to them, begging for help. But they don't notice him. They're too focused on finding Molly. They never even look in his direction. When the group escapes the void by riding out in Mr. Small's van, Rob desperately clings to the back of it. He manages to get pulled out of the void along with everyone else. But the escape is violent and chaotic, and his body is damaged in the process. He emerges on the other side physically disfigured. His appearance is glitchy and broken, like a corrupted video file. He looks wrong in a way that makes him stand out for the first time in his entire existence. His memories are also wiped, just like everyone else's. For a while after his escape, Rob has no idea who he is or where he came from. He wanders around with no purpose, no identity, no sense of self. He doesn't even remember being in the void. Eventually, Gumball and Darwin find him hiding in their basement. They try to help him figure out who he is by suggesting different roles he could play in Elmore. They go through possibilities: a hero, a sidekick, a mentor. But all of those roles are already taken by other characters. The only role that nobody else is filling, the only gap in Elmore's cast of characters, is a villain. And that's the moment everything changes. The suggestion of becoming a villain triggers Rob's memories to come flooding back. He remembers being in the void. He remembers calling out for help. He remembers being ignored. And he remembers that it was Gumball and Darwin who left him behind. He vows revenge. What makes Rob's character so compelling is that his vendetta is almost entirely justified, at least from his perspective. Gumball didn't intentionally abandon him. He simply didn't notice him. But to Rob, the effect is the same. He was invisible his entire life. He was erased from existence because he didn't matter enough to anyone. And when his one chance at salvation came, the people who could have saved him didn't even see him. Rob becomes Gumball's arch-nemesis, but his villainy is constantly undermined by his own incompetence and his own deep sadness. In one episode called The Nemesis, he tries to set up elaborate traps to destroy Gumball, but every single one of them fails spectacularly. He eventually gives up and tells Gumball and Darwin to just forget about him, like everyone else has. It's one of the most genuinely sad moments in the entire series. Gumball and Darwin actually help him become a better villain after that. They give him a costume, a catchphrase, even a villain name: Dr. Wrecker. It sounds ridiculous, but for Rob, it's the first time in his life that anyone has paid attention to him at all. Even if that attention is in the form of being someone's enemy. As the series progresses, Rob becomes increasingly aware of something far more disturbing than his grudge against Gumball. He begins to realize that their entire world is fictional, that they are all characters in a cartoon, that Gumball's role as the protagonist is literally built into the fabric of their reality. Gumball is the center of the universe. Everything revolves around him. And Rob, by contrast, is forced into the role of villain simply because that's the only part left for him to play. Rob at one point explicitly says he never wanted to be the villain. What he actually wanted was to be the cute sidekick who gets his own plush toy and a spin-off show. But the universe won't let him be anything else. He's trapped in a role he didn't choose, living a life defined entirely by his hatred for someone who didn't even know he existed. And then, in one of the show's most surprising turns, Rob actually tries to save everyone. When he discovers through Banana Barbara's prophetic paintings that the void is going to destroy Elmore entirely, he attempts to transform the main characters into humans so they can escape into what he calls the other place, presumably our reality. His plan fails, and he's the first person to fall into the void as it begins consuming the world. His warnings go completely unheeded. The question that lingers after all of this is whether Rob was ever truly a villain at all, or whether he was simply a person who was never given any other choice. But let's think about Rob a little more deeply, because his story touches on something that goes far beyond a simple revenge plot. Rob's tragedy isn't really about Gumball leaving him in the void. That was an accident. Gumball didn't even know Rob was there. The real tragedy is that Rob was never seen in the first place. He spent his entire existence as a background element, a piece of scenery, something the audience's eye would slide right over without registering. And the universe punished him for it. There's something deeply relatable about Rob's situation, even though he's a fictional character in a cartoon. How many people have felt invisible? How many people have walked through crowded rooms and felt like nobody noticed them? How many people have wondered whether they would even be missed if they simply disappeared one day? Rob's story takes that feeling and turns it into something literal. He wasn't just ignored, he was erased. And the only way he found to make the world acknowledge his existence was to become a villain. The show plays this for laughs a lot of the time. Rob is frequently incompetent. His plans fail in absurd ways. Gumball sometimes forgets his name entirely, which drives Rob to absolute fury. But underneath the comedy, there's a genuine portrait of someone who is desperately, achingly lonely. Someone who just wants to matter to somebody, even if the only way he can get that attention is by being hated. And in the end, Rob does something remarkable. When he discovers that the void is going to destroy Elmore, he doesn't run. He doesn't try to save himself. He tries to save everyone else. He transforms the main characters into humans so they can escape to our reality. He does this knowing full well that it will fail, knowing that nobody will listen to him, knowing that he'll be the first one to fall into the void when everything collapses. He does it anyway. Because for the first time in his life, Rob actually cares about something other than himself. It's the kind of quiet heroism that the show buries inside a villain's arc, and it's one of the reasons Rob is remembered so fondly by fans of the series. Darwin. How did a goldfish become a boy? Let's take a slightly lighter turn now, though this mystery is no less interesting for being a bit more whimsical. Darwin Watterson is Gumball's best friend, his adopted brother, and one of the most beloved characters in the show. He is also, as you might have noticed, a goldfish with legs, lungs, the ability to speak, and an enormous amount of emotional intelligence. So naturally, the question becomes, how exactly did a pet goldfish turn into a walking, talking member of the Watterson family? The show actually does address this directly in a two-part episode called The Origins, which serves as a kind of origin story for Darwin. In this episode, we see young Nicole and Richard struggling to keep their hyperactive toddler son Gumball entertained. They decide to get him a pet. They buy a goldfish. Unfortunately, that goldfish dies almost immediately. So they buy another one. That one dies too. They go through fish after fish in rapid succession, each one meeting a swift and unfortunate end. Finally, Richard buys a fish from a mysterious shopkeeper operating out of a red van in a parking lot. This is the same van shopkeeper we'll be talking about in more detail later. The shopkeeper warns Richard that this particular fish is more special than it seems. Richard, being Richard, doesn't really think much of this warning. He takes the fish home, names it Darwin, and puts it in a bowl on a shelf. For a while, everything seems normal. Darwin is just a regular goldfish. But then something happens. Gumball overfed him. He kept giving Darwin more and more food, all kinds of junk, and Darwin's body began to change. He outgrew his fishbowl, and in a process that mirrors actual evolutionary biology in a very exaggerated way, Darwin grew legs. He grew lungs. He learned to breathe air. he learned to walk, and eventually, he learned to talk. The show plays this off as a kind of rapid evolutionary adaptation. Darwin is named after Charles Darwin, the father of evolutionary theory, after all. The idea is that by being overfed and forced out of his natural environment, Darwin's body adapted to survive in the world of Elmore. He evolved legs because he needed to move around. He evolved lungs because he needed to breathe. It's absurd, of course, but it's presented with a kind of playful sincerity that makes it work within the logic of the show. But here's where the mystery deepens. Because the van shopkeeper knew this was going to happen, he warned Richard that the fish was special. He knew, before Darwin was even placed in the bowl, that this particular goldfish was somehow different from all the others. This raises the question of where Darwin actually came from. Was he just an ordinary goldfish that happened to be unusually adaptable? Or was he something else entirely, something the shopkeeper specifically chose to place in the Watterson household? There's a fan theory that suggests Darwin was never really a normal goldfish to begin with. The theory points to the fact that every other goldfish the Wattersons bought died almost immediately, but Darwin survived for years before his transformation. Something about him was fundamentally different, and the shopkeeper, who seems to have knowledge of things that extend far beyond ordinary reality, knew exactly what he was selling. Some fans have even theorized that Darwin might be connected to the void in some way. The idea being that Darwin was perhaps a mistake that the void expelled rather than absorbed. A fish that was supposed to be ordinary but turned out to be extraordinary. An anomaly that the universe couldn't quite get rid of, so it handed him off to the Wattersons instead. The show never confirms or denies any of this. All we know for certain is that Darwin is special in a way that even the mysterious shopkeeper recognized, and that his transformation from a simple pet into a fully realized person is one of the most remarkable events in the history of Elmore. But there's another layer to Darwin's story that deserves some attention. Darwin's emotional nature is one of the defining characteristics of the show. He is the most empathetic, the most emotionally open, the most genuinely caring character in the entire series. He feels things deeply. He cries easily. He loves fiercely. In a show full of cynical, self-interested, and often cruel characters, Darwin is the one who consistently acts out of compassion. This raises an interesting question about what Darwin actually is. If he truly is just a goldfish who evolved legs and lungs through overeating, then where does all of that emotional depth come from? Fish don't have complex emotional lives. They don't form bonds. They don't experience love or grief or loyalty the way Darwin does. Something about his nature goes beyond simple biological adaptation. Some fans have theorized that Darwin's emotional sensitivity might actually be a remnant of whatever made him special in the first place. That the same quality that allowed him to evolve beyond his physical limitations, the same thing that made the van shopkeeper warn Richard that he was more special than he seems, is also the source of his extraordinary emotional capacity. Darwin isn't just a fish who learned to walk. He's a fish who learned to feel. And that might be the most remarkable thing about him of all. It also raises questions about Darwin's place in the Watterson family. He's adopted, technically. He's not biologically related to any of them. And yet, he fits more naturally into the family than almost anyone else. Nicole loves him as deeply as she loves her biological children. Richard considers him his favorite, though he tries to hide it. Even Aeneas, who can be cold and calculating with others, genuinely adores Darwin. There's something about Darwin that makes people love him instinctively, as if his very presence radiates warmth and sincerity. Whether that's just good character writing, or whether it's connected to whatever supernatural quality the van shopkeeper recognized in him, is a question the show leaves deliberately open. Penny Fitzgerald. What is she really? Penny Fitzgerald is one of the most important characters in the show, serving as Gumball's love interest throughout the entire series. For the first 3 seasons, she appears as what looks like an anthropomorphic peanut with antlers growing out of her head. She's friendly, she's kind, and she's quietly in love with Gumball, who is equally in love with her, but spectacularly bad at expressing it. And then, in a pivotal Season 3 episode called The Shell, everything changes. During a school play, Gumball accidentally headbutts Penny, cracking open her shell. And what's underneath isn't a peanut at all. Penny is revealed to be a shape-shifting fairy. Her true form is a golden, luminous creature with wings, and she can transform into different shapes based on her emotions. When she's angry, she becomes a fire-breathing dragon. When she's sad, she transforms into something dark and monstrous. When she's afraid, she shifts into a small, cowering creature. Her form is essentially a mirror of how she feels inside. This revelation raises several questions that the show only partially answers. First, why does the entire Fitzgerald family wear these shells? It's established that the Fitzgeralds are a long line of shape-shifting fairies and that they have been wearing shells for generations. But the exact reason why is never made entirely clear. The most logical explanation offered by the show is that the shells are meant to contain their dangerous shape-shifting powers. Without the shell, Penny's transformations are tied entirely to her emotions, which means she has very little control over what she becomes. A sudden burst of anger could turn her into a dragon in the middle of a crowded classroom. Penny's father, Patrick Fitzgerald, is particularly insistent that she stay in her shell. He's shown to be deeply uncomfortable with the idea of her being out in the open without it, and at one point he even tries to have her transferred to a different school to keep her hidden. His protectiveness reads as controlling at first, but it gradually becomes clear that he genuinely believes the shell is keeping Penny safe, not just from the world, but from herself. The deeper mystery here is about identity and perception. For years, everyone in Elmore saw Penny as a peanut. They formed opinions about her, built relationships with her, loved her, based entirely on an appearance that wasn't really her at all. When she comes out of her shell, some people struggle to accept the change. They don't recognize her. They don't understand who she is now. It raises questions about how much of who we think we know about someone is really just the shell they put on for the world to see. There's also an interesting thread regarding whether Penny's shell is metaphorical as well as literal. The show draws parallels between Penny's situation and anyone who has ever hidden a part of themselves from the world. Her family's tradition of wearing shells becomes a commentary on how people sometimes suppress who they really are in order to fit in or protect themselves from judgment. Penny breaking out of her shell is presented as an act of tremendous courage, even though it leaves her vulnerable and uncertain. What remains a genuine mystery is whether the Fitzgerald shells have any connection to the larger supernatural forces at work in Elmore. Given that the van shopkeeper sells reality-bending artifacts, and given that the void seems to influence the nature of existence in the town, it's possible that the shells themselves are more than just a family tradition. They might be something the Fitzgeralds acquired, or were given at some point in their history, something with properties that go beyond simple containment. The show never explores this possibility, but it's the kind of question that keeps fans speculating. There's also something worth examining in the way Penny's father reacts to her coming out of her shell. Patrick Fitzgerald is not a cruel man. He's not trying to oppress his daughter or control her for selfish reasons. He genuinely believes the shell is protecting her, and in a way, he's right. The shell does protect Penny. It keeps her emotions contained. It prevents her from accidentally transforming into a dragon in the middle of class. It gives her a stable, predictable appearance that the world can understand and accept. But the shell also prevents Penny from being fully herself. It keeps her hidden. It forces her to present a version of herself that isn't real, a carefully constructed exterior that tells the world exactly what she wants them to see and nothing more. And the longer she stays in that shell, the more suffocating it becomes. the more she wants to break free and show the world who she actually is, messy and unpredictable, and beautiful and terrifying all at once. The episode The Shell is widely considered one of the best episodes in the entire series, and it's not just because of the romance between Gumball and Penny, although that's certainly a big part of it. It's because of what Penny's transformation represents. It's about the courage it takes to be vulnerable, to let someone see you without your armor, to trust that the people around you will love you, not despite who you really are, but because of it. Gumball sees every single one of Penny's forms, the dragon, the monster, the frightened creature, all of them, and he doesn't run. He chases after her. He tells her she's beautiful, and for the first time, Penny believes it. It's one of the most genuinely moving moments in the show, and it transforms Penny from a supporting character into one of the most emotionally resonant figures in the entire series. Banana Barbara. Does she predict the future, or does she create it? Banana Barbara is one of the strangest and most quietly powerful characters in the entire show, and her abilities raise questions that the series deliberately never fully resolves. Barbara is Banana Joe's mother. She's an eccentric, somewhat detached woman who spends most of her time painting, and her paintings predict the future. This ability first becomes apparent in Season 3. Gumball stumbles across a collection of Barbara's paintings at a yard sale and discovers that every single one of them depicts events that have already happened. Past episodes, past adventures, past moments in the lives of the characters in Elmore. They're all there, frozen on canvas, painted before they ever occurred. When Barbara paints a new picture showing Gumball running naked through a mall in front of an angry crowd, Gumball spends the entire episode trying desperately to prevent it from happening. He fails. The prophecy comes true exactly as it was painted, and no matter what he does, no matter how hard he tries to change the outcome, fate finds a way to make it happen anyway. It's a classic self-fulfilling prophecy. Gumball's attempts to avoid the painting are precisely what caused the painting to come true. At the end of that episode, Barbara paints one more picture. This one shows the entire Watterson family running in terror as Elmore collapses around them, being swallowed by the void. She looks directly at the camera as she finishes it, with a small, enigmatic smile. It's one of the creepiest moments in the show's history, and it foreshadows events that won't fully unfold until several seasons later. Now, here's where Barbara's story gets truly fascinating. In later episodes, it becomes clear that Barbara's abilities might not just be predictive, they might actually be creative. In an episode called The Future, it's shown that Barbara can not only paint what's going to happen, but actively paint things into existence. When someone uses her paintbrush with intent, drawing something on a surface becomes a command to reality. Rob uses this ability to create weapons, to manipulate the environment, and even to erase Gumball from existence entirely by painting over his portrait. This means that Barbara's paintings might not be predictions at all. They might be instructions. When she paints the future, she might not be seeing what's going to happen. She might be deciding what's going to happen. The events depicted in her paintings come true not because they were inevitable, but because painting them made them real. This interpretation raises an enormous question. If Barbara is the one causing the events she paints, then how much of what has happened in Elmore over the course of the series is actually her doing? Did she cause Gumball to end up naked at the mall? Did she orchestrate the void-consuming Elmore? Is she, in some sense, the true architect of everything that has happened? There's a fan theory that takes this idea to its logical extreme. The theory suggests that Banana Barbara might actually be connected to the creation of the void itself. The idea is that Barbara's painting abilities are so powerful that they can reshape reality, and that at some point in her past, perhaps during some kind of mental breakdown or loss of control, she accidentally created the void. A dimension where all her mistakes, all her failed paintings, all the things she painted into existence and then tried to erase ended up. The theory points to the fact that Barbara's garage walls are covered in paintings of static. Static that looks identical to the visual texture of the void. Every time she tries to paint the future and fails, the canvas fills with this static pattern. It's as if the void is bleeding through her paintings, or as if her paintings are windows into it. The show never confirms this theory, but it also never denies it. And the way Barbara is written, with her detached demeanor, her occasional moments of seemingly knowing far more than she lets on, and her quiet, unsettling smile, suggests that there's something about her that the show's writers are deliberately keeping shrouded in mystery. The one thing that does seem clear is that Barbara's abilities have limits. There is one event she cannot paint around, one outcome she cannot change. The void consuming Elmore. When she tries to paint the future after a certain point, all she gets is static. There is no future, she says. It's the closest thing the show ever comes to confirming that the void is ultimately beyond anyone's control, even someone with the power to reshape reality through a paintbrush. But let's linger on Barbara's static paintings for a moment, because they're one of the most quietly unsettling elements in the entire show. Her garage walls are covered in paintings, dozens of them. Some depict past events, some depict future events, and a significant number of them are just static, pure visual noise, the same texture as the void itself. What does it mean that Barbara keeps painting static? Is she trying to see through the void and failing? Is the void somehow blocking her vision of the future, like interference on a television signal? Or is she painting the void itself, over and over again, compulsively, as if she can't stop? The show never tells us which of these interpretations is correct. There's a theory that suggests Barbara might actually be suffering from some form of spiritual or metaphysical trauma, that her connection to the future, whatever its source, has opened a door in her mind that she can't close. And through that door, the void is constantly bleeding in. Every time she tries to paint, there's a chance the void will bleed through instead, filling her canvas with static and drowning out whatever she was trying to see. It would explain why she seems so detached and distant in her interactions with others. She's not just eccentric, she's overwhelmed. She's constantly being bombarded by something she can't fully comprehend or control. Barbara's son, Banana Joe, is asked about his mother's mental state at one point, and his response is telling. He doesn't think she has mental problems at all. He says she enjoys them. It's played as a joke. But underneath the humor, there's something genuinely sad about a man who has accepted his mother's condition as normal, who doesn't even recognize that she might be suffering. The van shopkeeper. Who is this man, and where do his items come from? If there is one character in the amazing world of Gumball whose true nature is deliberately kept as mysterious as possible, it's the van shopkeeper. He runs a red van that Richard Watterson has affectionately dubbed the Awesome Store. The van is usually parked in the Elmore Mall parking garage, and it sells a dizzying array of bizarre, often dangerous, reality-bending artifacts. The evil turtle, the universal remote, cursed umbrellas, possessed cell phones, game consoles that trap entire towns inside virtual worlds, a magic notebook that can rewrite the laws of the universe. All of it sold out of a beat-up van by a shadowy figure whose face you can never quite see. The van shopkeeper himself is rendered as a black, smoky, humanoid shape. He has two glowing white eyes with small black pupils. His full body has never been shown on screen. He speaks in a calm, slightly theatrical manner, and he seems to genuinely enjoy the chaos that his products cause, even when that chaos is catastrophic. The first and most obvious question is, where do these items come from? The Awesome Store sells things that don't exist anywhere else in Elmore, things that bend, break, or completely override the normal rules of reality. Nobody in town seems to know how the shopkeeper acquires them, and he never explains. Some fans have theorized that his items come from the void, that he somehow harvests objects from the dimension of mistakes and sells them back into the world. This would explain why so many of his products feel fundamentally wrong, why they cause chaos and unpredictability. They're objects that were discarded for a reason, and putting them back into reality creates instability. Others have theorized that the shopkeeper himself might be from outside of Elmore's reality entirely, that he's some kind of interdimensional traveler or trader who moves between worlds, collecting unusual objects and selling them to whoever will buy them. The fact that his appearance is so strange that he looks more like a shadow than a person supports this idea. He doesn't look like anything else in Elmore. He looks like something that doesn't belong. But the most compelling theory, and the one that's actually supported by what happens in the show's final episodes, is that the van shopkeeper might be something far more powerful than a simple merchant. In The Rewrite, which is essentially the show's true finale, it's revealed that the shopkeeper saved Rob from falling into the void after the events of the Inquisition. He caught Rob as he was falling, pulled him back from the edge, and then did something remarkable. He expanded into what the show describes as cybercrime, meaning he gained the ability to rewrite the narrative of the series itself. He used Rob as a tool to prevent Gumball and Darwin from discovering the truth about their fictional reality, because if they did discover it, the void would destroy everything. After accomplishing this, the shopkeeper passes his role on to Rob. He essentially retires, handing over the responsibility of protecting Elmore to the one person who already knows the truth and has the motivation to keep it hidden. This suggests that the shopkeeper has been doing this kind of work for a very long time. Protecting worlds, maintaining the stability of fictional realities, selling dangerous objects along the way, perhaps as a kind of test, or perhaps simply because he can. The show's creator, Ben Bacalé, has joked in interviews that the show probably should have been called The Wonderfully Weird World of Rob, because Rob seems to be the only character who actually cares about protecting Elmore. But if you look at the shopkeeper's actions across the entire series, there's an argument that he's been doing quiet, behind-the-scenes work to keep everything together long before Rob ever got involved. He warned Richard about Darwin. He tried to stop Rob from taking the Universal Remote. He saved Rob from the void. He rewrote the narrative to protect the world. He's not just a shopkeeper. He might be one of the few characters in the show who genuinely understands what Elmore is, what the void is, and what needs to happen to keep everything from falling apart. And he's been doing it quietly, invisibly, from inside a van in a mall parking garage the whole time. But this raises another fascinating question. If the van shopkeeper knows so much, if he understands the void and the nature of Elmore's reality, then why does he keep selling dangerous items? Why does he hand out cursed artifacts and reality-bending devices to random customers, knowing full well that these things will cause chaos? He sold Richard the evil turtle, which went on a rampage through Elmore. He sold Rob the Universal Remote, which Rob used to tear apart Gumball's family and nearly destroy the world. He sold a Game Child console that trapped an entire town inside a virtual prison. The shopkeeper tries to stop some of the worst outcomes. He tried to take the Universal Remote back from Rob before it was too late. He warns customers occasionally that certain items are dangerous, but he never stops selling entirely. He never closes the van. He keeps offering his wares to anyone who comes looking, even when he knows what those wares might do. One interpretation is that the shopkeeper is testing people, that his items are a kind of trial, and how someone reacts to the power they receive tells him something important about their character. Richard buying a fishbowl containing Darwin is relatively harmless. Richard buying a star that bankrupted his family is foolish, but not malicious. Rob using the Universal Remote for revenge is genuinely dangerous. Each purchase reveals something about the buyer, and perhaps the shopkeeper is watching all of it, cataloging the results, learning something about the nature of Elmore and its inhabitants. Another interpretation is simpler, but no less interesting. Perhaps the shopkeeper isn't fully in control of what he sells. Perhaps his van contains items that come from outside of normal reality, and he has no choice but to get rid of them somehow. Selling them is the only option available to him. The chaos they cause is an unfortunate side effect of a process he can't stop, only manage. Either way, the van shopkeeper remains one of the most enigmatic figures in the show. A character who seems to exist on a level above everyone else, who sees the bigger picture that nobody else can see, and who keeps doing his quiet, strange work, regardless of the consequences. Gumball. Is he the center of the universe? This one is fascinating because it's a theory that the show itself essentially confirms, even though it's never stated quite so directly. The idea is this: Gumball Watterson is not just the main character of the show. He is literally the center of reality in Elmore. The entire world exists because of him. And if he were to stop being who he is, or if he were to change in a fundamental way, the world would begin to fall apart. The evidence for this starts piling up early in the series, but it becomes most explicit in the later seasons. First, there's the way the world seems to bend around Gumball in ways that don't quite make sense. The Awesome Store's products always seem to find their way to the Wattersons somehow. Incredible coincidences constantly pull Gumball into the center of dramatic events. The universe seems almost conspiratorial in the way it keeps him involved in everything. Then there's the Void. We established earlier that the Void erases mistakes and things that don't serve a purpose. But throughout the series, Gumball is notably immune to the Void. Even when he ends up inside it, even when there's no obvious protection keeping him safe, the Void doesn't erase him. It can't. Because Gumball isn't a mistake. He's the reason Elmore exists in the first place. Rob makes this point explicitly during one of their confrontations. He tells Gumball that the entire world revolves around him, that Gumball's status as the protagonist isn't just a narrative convenience. It's a fundamental property of the universe they live in. Everything in Elmore exists to give Gumball a backdrop. Every character, every location, every event exists in relation to him. This raises a deeply uncomfortable question. If Gumball is the center of reality, then what happens when he grows up? There's a theory that suggests Gumball's approaching 13th birthday is actually a threat to the existence of Elmore. The idea is that Gumball's role as the center of the universe is specifically tied to him being a kid. A mischievous, chaotic, endlessly curious 12-year-old. If he were to grow up, if he were to become a teenager and lose that childlike energy that drives the show, the world would lose its reason for existing. This connects to something Banana Barbara says in the show's final season. When she tries to paint the future and gets nothing but static, she states simply that there is no future. The theory is that she's not talking about the Void destroying Elmore. She's talking about Gumball. His 13th birthday is approaching. The world's kid hero is about to stop being a kid. And when that happens, the show, and by extension, the universe, has nowhere left to go. It's a deeply meta idea, one that blurs the line between the fictional world of Elmore and the real world where The Amazing World of Gumball is a television show that eventually ended. But it's also one of the most elegant explanations for why things work the way they do in the show. Gumball isn't just lucky. He isn't just the main character by convention. He is, in a very literal sense, the reason everything around him exists at all. And this creates a fascinating paradox. Gumball is the center of the universe, but he doesn't know it. He goes about his daily life making mistakes, causing chaos, stumbling from one disaster to the next, completely unaware that the entire world is structured around him. He doesn't understand why the Void can't touch him. He doesn't understand why the universe keeps pulling him back to the center of every dramatic event. He doesn't understand why his existence is so fundamentally important to the stability of everything around him. There's something almost tragic about that, Gumball carries the weight of an entire reality on his shoulders, and he has absolutely no idea. He's a 12-year-old kid who just wants to fit in at school, impress his girlfriend, and avoid getting in trouble with his mom. The cosmic significance of his existence is entirely invisible to him, and in a way, that might be what makes him so effective at his role. If he knew how important he was, if he understood the pressure of being the reason Elmore exists, he might crack under it. The innocence of not knowing might be exactly what keeps the world spinning. It also raises the question of what happens when Gumball eventually grows up. Not just in terms of the show ending, but in terms of the character himself maturing. There are moments throughout the series where Gumball shows genuine growth, where he becomes a little more responsible, a little more empathetic, a little more aware of the world around him. Each time he does, it's a step toward becoming someone who is no longer quite the chaotic, mischievous kid that the universe needs him to be. And each step brings Elmore a little bit closer to the edge. The mystery box. What was inside? Let's take a brief detour to one of the show's most beloved standalone mysteries. In a Season 3 episode called The Box, a plain cardboard box is delivered to the Watterson household with no return address. Nobody knows who sent it. Nobody knows what's inside. And the family is forbidden from opening it because it isn't addressed to any of them. What follows is one of the most brilliantly written episodes in the entire series. The family's collective obsession with the contents of the box escalates steadily throughout the episode. At first, it's mild curiosity. Then, it becomes speculation. Then, it becomes paranoia. Then, it becomes full-blown psychological warfare as each family member tries to figure out what's inside without actually opening it. Gumball shakes the box and listens. Richard tries to X-ray it with his eyes through sheer concentration. Anais attempts to deduce the contents through logical analysis. Nicole threatens everyone with increasingly creative punishments if anyone opens it. The whole episode is a masterclass in character development because the way each person reacts to the mystery reveals something fundamental about who they are. And then the episode ends. Without ever revealing what's inside the box, the contents are never shown. Not in this episode, not in any future episode. It's one of the show's most deliberate and celebrated choices. The writers made a conscious decision to leave this mystery completely unresolved, and the reason why is actually more interesting than any answer could have been. The box is what storytellers call a MacGuffin. It's an object whose actual value doesn't matter. What matters is how people react to it. The box could contain anything: a treasure, a weapon, a single peanut. It doesn't matter. What the episode is really about is the way uncertainty drives people apart. The way not knowing something can consume an entire family. The way a simple object, with no inherent significance whatsoever, can become the most important thing in the room simply because nobody knows what it is. Fan theories about the box's contents range from the mundane to the absurd. Some people think it was empty the whole time, that the entire episode was the family torturing themselves over nothing. Others have suggested it contained a mirror, turning the mystery into a metaphor about self-reflection. A few have proposed that it was a gift from Rob, sent specifically to cause chaos. And one particularly clever theory suggests that the box contains the same mysterious glowing briefcase from the movie Pulp Fiction, another famous MacGuffin whose contents are never revealed. The truth is, the show's writers probably know exactly what they intended to be inside the box, but they also know that telling us would ruin the point. The mystery is the message. Some things are more interesting as questions than they would ever be as answers. Nicole and Richard. The relationship that shouldn't work. Nicole and Richard Watterson are, on the surface, one of the most mismatched couples in animated television history. Nicole is a hard-working, disciplined, occasionally terrifying martial artist who holds down a demanding job while raising 3 children. Richard is a lazy, food-obsessed, frequently oblivious stay-at-home dad who spends most of his time sleeping or watching television. They couldn't be more different. So how did they end up together? And more importantly, why do they stay together? The show actually addresses this in a beautiful Season 5 episode called The Choices. In this episode, Nicole reflects on her life and traces back to the day she first met Richard. They were children when they met, pushing each other on swings in a park. Over the years, they grew closer, but their relationship faced enormous obstacles. Nicole's parents were controlling and demanding. They disapproved of Richard entirely. They saw him as beneath their daughter, a lazy, worthless rabbit who would only hold Nicole back. Nicole's parents were so opposed to the relationship that when Nicole and Richard eventually got married, her parents didn't even show up to the wedding. They tried to attend, but they apparently interpreted the RSVP as the name of a town in Eastern Europe and went there instead. It's played for a laugh in the show, but there's something genuinely sad underneath it. Nicole's parents missed their own daughter's wedding because they couldn't be bothered to pay attention. Despite all of this, Nicole chose Richard, not because he was impressive or ambitious or conventionally successful. She chose him because he was one of the very few people in her life who actually accepted her for who she was. Nicole grew up in a household where nothing was ever good enough, where every achievement was met with higher expectations, where love felt conditional on performance. Richard, for all his flaws, loved Nicole completely and unconditionally. He never asked her to be anything other than what she already was. The mystery that remains, though, is how this relationship actually functions on a day-to-day basis. Nicole is essentially running the household alone. She works full-time, raises 3 children, and handles virtually every practical aspect of their lives. Richard contributes almost nothing in terms of labor or responsibility. On paper, this should be a recipe for resentment and eventual collapse. And yet, in episode after episode, you can see that Nicole genuinely loves Richard. She's frustrated with him constantly. She's exasperated by his laziness, his stupidity, his complete inability to function as an adult. But she never leaves. She never seriously considers leaving. Because underneath all of the chaos and the incompetence, Richard gives her something that nobody else in her life has ever given her. He makes her feel safe. He makes her feel like she doesn't have to be perfect all the time. He is, in his own strange way, the most emotionally stable person in the Watterson household. It's one of the show's quietest and most genuinely moving storylines, buried underneath layers of absurd comedy. And it raises questions about what love actually looks like in practice, especially for someone who grew up never feeling like they were enough. Richard's own backstory adds another layer to this. His father, Frankie, abandoned the family when Richard was young, leaving under the pretense of going out to buy milk and never coming back. This shaped Richard profoundly. It made him deeply afraid of abandonment, deeply attached to his mother, and deeply insecure about his own worth. The fact that Nicole stayed with him despite everything, that she chose him and kept choosing him, is in many ways the most meaningful thing that has ever happened to Richard. It's the thing that keeps him tethered to reality. But there's something else about the Watterson family dynamic that deserves examination. Nicole's first name is actually Dr. Nicole Watterson. It's revealed in a later episode called The Parents, almost as an afterthought. She was named Doctor by her demanding perfectionist mother, who apparently decided before Nicole was even born that her daughter would become a successful medical professional. It's a name that carries the weight of expectation before a child even draws her first breath. Nicole didn't become a doctor. She became a worker at a candy factory. By her mother's standards, she failed entirely. And yet, Nicole built a life that her mother's rigid expectations could never have predicted or appreciated. She found love with someone her parents dismissed. She raised 3 children in a chaotic household that somehow works despite every reason it shouldn't. She built something real and warm and messy and alive, and she did it entirely on her own terms. The mystery of Nicole isn't really about what she does or how she manages her household. It's about how someone who grew up feeling like they would never be enough learned to become someone who is more than enough for the people who matter to her. It's one of the show's quietest and most deeply human stories, told almost entirely through implication and small moments rather than grand dramatic gestures. And somewhere underneath all of that, buried in the background of every chaotic episode, is a marriage that genuinely works. Not because Nicole and Richard are perfectly matched. They're not. They're almost comically mismatched in every possible way. But because they chose each other, freely, completely, and with full knowledge of each other's flaws. And in the world of Elmore, where so much is determined by fate and fiction and the whims of a universe that doesn't always care about the people living in it, that choice might be the most powerful thing of all. Elmore itself. Why is everything alive? We've spent a lot of time talking about individual characters and specific mysteries, but there's a bigger question lurking underneath all of it. One that the show never really bothers to explain. Why is Elmore the way it is? Why is everything in this town alive and sentient? Why are there talking hot dogs, living clouds, sentient pencils, animate objects of every conceivable type walking around and going about their daily business? In most animated shows, this kind of thing is simply accepted as part of the world. The audience isn't expected to question it. It's just how things are. But the amazing world of Gumball is unusual in that it seems to be deliberately aware of how strange its own world is. Characters occasionally comment on the absurdity of their surroundings. The show frequently breaks its own internal logic for the sake of a joke, and the existence of the void, which collects the world's mistakes, implies that there is some kind of system governing what exists and what doesn't in Elmore. One theory suggests that Elmore might actually be a place where rejected fictional characters go to live. A world created specifically to house characters that were designed for other shows or stories, but never made it to the final product. The van shopkeeper's mysterious artifacts would fit this interpretation, as would the incredible diversity of character designs in the show. Every person in Elmore looks completely different from every other person. There are no two characters who share the same visual style. It's as if they were all created by different artists, for different purposes, and then somehow ended up in the same place. This connects to the show's real-world production history. The creator of Gumball, Ben Bacalé, has stated in interviews that many of the show's characters were originally designed as characters for commercial advertisements he worked on before the show existed. They were rejected from those projects, deemed unnecessary or unsuitable, and eventually found new life in Elmore. In a very literal sense, the characters of the amazing world of Gumball are rejects, characters who were cut from other projects and given a second chance in this one. If you layer that real-world fact on top of the show's fictional mythology, it starts to look remarkably coherent. Elmore is a world for mistakes, a world for things that didn't fit anywhere else, and the void, which threatens to consume Elmore entirely, is the mechanism by which those mistakes are eventually reclaimed. It's a world that exists on borrowed time, sustained only by the presence of its kid hero, and the quiet interventions of people like the van shopkeeper who keep it from falling apart. It's a surprisingly poignant idea when you think about it. Every character in Elmore, from the main cast to the most obscure background extra, is someone who was once deemed unnecessary, someone who didn't fit, someone who was about to be erased. And yet, here they are, living their lives, having adventures, falling in love, making friends, finding meaning in a world that was never supposed to exist in the first place. But let's think about what Elmore actually looks like as a place. It's a town where literally everything is alive. The clouds have faces. The trees have personalities. Hot dogs walk around on legs. There are living pencils, sentient newspapers, animate objects of every conceivable type going about their daily business as if this is perfectly normal. And for the most part, the residents of Elmore don't question it. They don't wonder why a cloud is sentient. They don't ask how a pencil became a person. It's just how things are. This acceptance raises questions about the nature of consciousness in Elmore. Is there a threshold? Does something need to reach a certain level of complexity before it becomes aware of itself? Or is consciousness in Elmore simply everywhere, distributed equally among all matter, all objects, all things? If the latter is true, then Elmore isn't just a town where everything happens to be alive. It's a fundamentally different kind of reality, one where the boundary between object and person simply doesn't exist. The show occasionally plays with this idea in interesting ways. There are moments where an object that was previously just an object suddenly becomes a character. A piece of furniture develops a personality. A food item gains awareness. It happens so casually that you almost don't notice it, but each time it does, it reinforces the idea that in Elmore, the line between living and not living is incredibly thin, maybe non-existent. And this connects back to the void, because if everything in Elmore is potentially alive, then the void's job of erasing mistakes becomes even more horrifying. It's not just erasing objects or concepts, it's erasing conscious beings, beings that think and feel and exist. The void is, in the truest sense, a force of death. Not dramatic, violent death, but quiet, silent, unnoticed death. The kind that nobody mourns because nobody remembers it happened. It's a remarkably dark underpinning for a show that spends most of its time making audiences laugh. But that contrast between the surface-level absurdity and the deep existential dread lurking underneath is part of what makes the amazing world of Gumball such a uniquely memorable piece of television. The mysteries that were never solved. Before we wrap up tonight, let's take a moment to acknowledge some of the smaller mysteries scattered throughout the series that were never given satisfying resolutions. These are the loose threads, the unexplained moments, the questions that the show raised and then quietly moved on from without ever coming back to answer. There's the question of what happened to Daisy the donkey. For the first several seasons, Daisy is a recurring presence in Anais' life. She's a beloved doll, a beloved character within the show's universe. And then, without explanation or ceremony, she simply stops appearing. She vanishes from the series almost entirely in the final season. Some fans believe she was sent to the void. Others think Anais simply grew out of her. The show offers no clarity. There's the mystery of what exactly the mysterious person in the static screen at the end of The Future is. When Banana Barbara declares there is no future, and the screen fills with static, a vague silhouette of a figure appears within it. It's only there for a moment, and it's never explained. Nobody knows who or what this figure is supposed to be. It could be a preview of something that was never followed up on, or it could be a deliberate tease that was left permanently unresolved. There's the question of why Gumball and Darwin never age, even as real-world time passes and the show spans what should be multiple years. Other characters seem to experience some degree of change over time, but the main boys remain perpetually 12. The show acknowledges this in its own way, with jokes about how their voices should be breaking, but aren't. But it's never explained in any satisfying way, beyond the theory we discussed earlier about Gumball being the center of reality and needing to remain a kid for the world to continue existing. And there's the ongoing question of the relationship between the show's fictional universe and our own. The void is explicitly tied to the concept of cancellation. Rob becomes aware that his world is fictional. The van shopkeeper seems to operate on a level of reality that transcends the show itself. These are all hints that the writers were building towards something larger, some kind of ultimate revelation about the nature of Elmore and its relationship to the real world. Whether that revelation was ever going to be fully delivered is something we may never know, because the show ended before it could get there. These unresolved threads are part of what keeps the Gumball fandom alive and active years after the original series concluded. They're invitations to keep thinking, keep theorizing, keep filling in the gaps with your own imagination. And in a way, that might be exactly what the writers intended. A story that never fully ends is a story that never stops being interesting. The Clown. Who is he, and why does he keep appearing? Let's talk about something a little creepier now, something that fans have been discussing for years without ever reaching a satisfying conclusion. Throughout the series, there is a mysterious clown who appears in various episodes, usually lurking in the background or showing up at seemingly random moments. He's not a main character. He's not given a name. He doesn't have dialogue that explains his presence. He just appears, watches, and then vanishes. The clown first becomes notable because of how often he shows up. In a show with hundreds of background characters, the clown recurs in a way that feels deliberate rather than accidental. He appears at parties. He shows up in crowd scenes. He's visible in places where a clown has no obvious reason to be. And each time, he seems to be watching the main characters, as if he's observing them from a distance. Fans have proposed several theories about who the clown might be. One of the most popular is that he's connected to the Void in some way. Perhaps he's a sentinel, an observer sent by the Void to monitor Elmore and decide which characters are at risk of being erased. He watches, he evaluates, and when someone becomes a mistake, he reports back. It would explain why he shows up so frequently and why he never interacts with anyone directly. He's not there to participate in the story. He's there to judge it. Another theory suggests that the clown might be a version of the van shopkeeper in disguise, or another entity operating on the same level of reality as the shopkeeper. Someone who exists outside the normal rules of Elmore and who observes the town's inhabitants the way a scientist might observe specimens in a laboratory. His clown appearance could be a kind of camouflage, a way of blending into a world where unusual appearances are common without drawing too much attention. A third and perhaps more unsettling theory is that the clown represents the audience itself. We, the viewers, are always watching the characters of Elmore. We observe their lives, their mistakes, their triumphs and failures from a position of complete detachment. We never interact with them. We never help them or warn them. We just watch. The clown, appearing silently in the background, watching without speaking, mirrors our own relationship to the show. He's a stand-in for us, a reminder that someone is always watching, even when the characters don't know it. The show never confirms any of these theories. The clown remains one of those background details that the writers either never intended to be scrutinized this closely or deliberately left ambiguous, because the mystery itself is more valuable than any answer could be. Anais, the smartest person in Elmore, and why that might be sadder than it sounds. We've spent a lot of time on Gumball, Darwin, Nicole, and Richard, but there's one member of the Watterson family we haven't given enough attention to. Anais Watterson is 4 years old. She is also, by a significant margin, the smartest person in the entire town of Elmore. She reads at a graduate level. She understands quantum physics. She can outthink adults, outsmart criminals, and solve problems that baffle everyone around her. She is, in every measurable sense, a genius. And she is also, in many ways, profoundly lonely. The show plays Anaïs's intelligence mostly for comedy. She's the voice of reason in a family full of chaos. She points out the obvious when nobody else can. She delivers deadpan observations about the absurdity of everything happening around her. It's funny. It works as a comedic dynamic. But if you look a little closer at how Anais is actually treated by the people around her, something sadder emerges. Nobody listens to her. Not really. Gumball dismisses her constantly. Richard doesn't understand half of what she says. Even Nicole, who loves her deeply, often treats Anaïs's intelligence as a curiosity rather than something to be nurtured or celebrated. Anaïs is the smartest person in every room she enters, and she has been since she was old enough to form sentences. And that distinction, rather than making her feel special, makes her feel isolated. The show touches on this in a few episodes. There's a moment where Anaïs desperately wants to fit in with the other kids at school, but her intellect makes her fundamentally incompatible with their social dynamics. She can't relate to them. They can't relate to her. She tries to dumb herself down, to pretend she's not as smart as she is, just so she can have normal friendships. It doesn't work. The mystery with Anaïs isn't about her intelligence itself. It's about what happens to someone who is that far ahead of everyone around them. How do you connect with people when you exist on an entirely different cognitive level? How do you feel normal when nothing about your experience of the world is normal? And how do you grow up in a household where the adults around you are, in many ways, less capable than you are? Anaïs is 4 years old. She shouldn't have to carry the emotional weight she carries. She shouldn't have to be the responsible one, the planner, the person who holds everything together when nobody else can. But she is. Because in the Watterson family, there's nobody else who can do it. It's another example of the show burying genuine emotional depth underneath layers of comedy. Anaïs's situation is never treated as tragic on screen. She's usually written as competent and confident. But there are cracks in that confidence, moments where you can see how much she wants to just be a kid, and how impossible that feels when the kid in question happens to be smarter than almost everyone she knows. The Watterson family fortune. How did they lose everything? Here's a mystery that's actually resolved in the show, but in a way that's so funny and so perfectly in character that it deserves its own discussion. The Wattersons used to have money. Real money. Enough savings to live comfortably, to give their children a stable and secure life. And then, overnight, they were broke. The answer is revealed in an episode called The Treasure. Bank statements hidden under the floorboards reveal that at one point, the Wattersons made a purchase of $24,000 to a company called Stellar Corporation. After that purchase, their savings went to zero. They've been poor ever since. The children find the key to a suitcase hidden in the wardrobe, and through a series of increasingly dramatic investigations, they eventually discover what happened. Richard, in a moment of impulsive stupidity, saw an advertisement on the computer for an out-of-space investment opportunity for the future of your kids. He clicked on it without reading the full terms. The investment turned out to be for the children 10 generations down the Watterson bloodline, not Gumball, Darwin, and Anaïs. Their great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren's children. Richard spent the family's entire life savings on an investment that won't pay off for centuries, if it pays off at all. And Stellar Corporation has since gone out of business, taking the money with it. The investment is almost certainly worthless. Richard has spent years hiding this from his family. He hid the bank statements. He hid the receipts. He hid every piece of evidence that connects him to the catastrophic financial decision that made the Wattersons poor. He did it out of shame, out of a desperate desire to protect his family from knowing that their financial ruin was entirely his fault. And when the truth finally comes out, the family doesn't fall apart. They don't rage at Richard. They forgive him almost immediately, not because what he did wasn't terrible. It was. But because they love him, and because in the grand scheme of things, the family still has each other. The episode ends with the whole family looking at the star Richard bought, a literal star in the sky that Richard purchased as part of the investment, glowing softly above them. It's absurd, it's ridiculous, and it's one of the most quietly beautiful moments in the entire series. The mystery here isn't really about the money, it's about what it means to forgive someone for something genuinely unforgivable, and what it means to love a family member not despite their flaws, but in full knowledge of them. And there you have it, everyone. 2 hours of mysteries, theories, and deep dives into the hidden layers of the amazing world of Gumball. From the terrifying quiet of the void, to the tragic origins of a villain nobody remembered, to the question of whether a banana woman is secretly rewriting reality with a paintbrush, this show packed an extraordinary amount of depth and mystery into what most people would dismiss as a silly cartoon for kids. The truth is, The Amazing World of Gumball is one of the most ambitious animated series ever made. It took an absurd, colorful, chaotic world and quietly built an entire mythology underneath it. It asked questions about identity, about purpose, about what it means to exist, and it did so with humor and heart and a surprising amount of genuine emotion. I hope tonight's journey was a relaxing one. I hope some of these mysteries gave you something interesting to think about as you drift off. And if you found yourself enjoying this, please do remember to subscribe. It's free, it costs you nothing, and it helps us keep making these kinds of videos for you. Thank you for spending 2 hours with me tonight. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being part of this wonderful little community. Sleep well, everyone. Sweet dreams. And if you happen to see a mysterious red van in a parking lot tomorrow, maybe don't buy anything from it. Good night.